Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Dobrynya Nikitich. She's a 4-star rider added to FGO with the Tunguska Sanctuary update. She's in the general pool too, so even after Tunguska ends, she'll be riding after you for life. Is that a good thing? Let's find out. First up, we have Eternal Young War Maiden. I'm running this before Tunguska, so skill names are tentative. It grants 1 stack of Guts and Debuff immunity. Also stars per turn. It's alright, but your lowest priority skill overall since you get the bulk of its benefits just for having it. Dobrinya's second skill is Belza Damask, Shining White Dragon Slaying Armaments. It's a 3-turn hybrid arts and buster buff, also granting special damage against dragon trait enemies. That's right, Dobrynya has thrown her hat into the anti-dragon ring to compete with the likes of Siegfried and Sigurd. I'd recommend keeping this skill relatively leveled since that niche forms a major part of Dobrinya's use case. Now we come to Belza Burko, my beloved Shining White Horse. It's a 20% battery at max level that comes with party crit and anti-dragon buffs. Realistically, you're not going to be using Dobrynya as a support or even as a supportive attacker, so treat it as an extra dragon buff for herself. That 20% is going to be an awkward number though. Dobrynya's noble phantasm is Zmi Godinich. It's an AoE buster attack that ignores defense, applies a burn, and reduces defense. For its overcharge, it preemptively buffs her buster performance for a single turn. Given Dobrynya's 2A2B deck, it's also her only method of making a buster brave chain. This combo puts her in a pretty awkward spot. Being a buster AoE is a problem since, strictly speaking, she's not Vich compatible. You can technically 3-turn farm with a coin and 2 Oberons, but that's not really a desirable arrangement since you're using a lot of extra resources for not all that much in the damage department. So unless you're spending a lot of time killing wyverns, I'd avoid recruiting her specifically as a farmer. What you're really after here is her single target potential. By popping her anti-dragon buffs and then going in for an NP double buster chain, you can devastate your target. For this purpose, you should run her with Koyanskaya anyway since her cooldowns are short enough to double up with the help of the Atlas uniform. This arrangement does leave Dobrynya without a standard attack buff, so I'd recommend Gold and Sumo for general usage. Also equip her with the Demonic Dragon of Twilight command code to extend her reach against dragon enemies. But here we run into a different issue. The standard dragon-type foes are riders, and while her stack of trait buffs compensates to a degree, lacking class advantage is always an awkward spot for this type of servant. It's not like you have a reason to throw hands with Sieg after all. Without many caster dragons to prey on, Dobrynya only truly shines against berserker dragons. She'll do the job, but how many resources are you willing to commit for that narrow application? If anything, you may find more success doing the age-old St. George cheese. By running him with a K-scope and taunting, you can turn the caster of your choice into a dragon and let Dobrynya leverage the full brunt of her skill set against them. For my part though, I'd recommend just running someone with true class advantage to avoid any run-ins with Murphy's Law. In the end, Dobrynya Nikitich is stuck with a kit that's heavily lore-influenced and consequently very clunky in practice, and deliberately so. An extra 10% on her battery and she'd be able to double Koyan/single Oberon, which would not only let her farm, but also increase her sustained damage against the dragons she's supposed to be fighting. She was made to be mediocre, and that's a real shame. With that out of the way, let's get to the legend of Dobrynya Nikitich. In Eastern Europe, the Kievan Rus had formed a state that extended from the western part of modern-day Russia all the way down to the Black Sea. Dobrynya was a bogatyr, a man that for the Rus was akin to a knight of the round table. They'd go on wild adventures, but instead of a grail quest, it was more of a fuck around and find out quest. Dobrynya's journey starts at a pretty interesting place, his mom's house. He was preparing to go on the road and his mom said, "Alright, go on your quest, but remember these 4 things. Don't do them, alright? Just promise me you won't." Number 1. Stay the hell away from the Saracen Mountains, which doesn't correspond to any real place that I can think of. The term Saracen suggests Arabs, but the Abbasid Caliphate wasn't that close to Kievan Rus territory. They'd gotten as far north as Armenia, but there was still a buffer between the two. Maybe Dobrynya's mom was worried he'd ride all the way down to Egypt if he was left to his own business. Rule number 2. Don't step on baby dragons. Number 3. If you see any Rus prisoners, leave them where they are. Number 4. There's a river called the Pukai. You can wash yourself in any river, just not that one. With his mother's 4 rules in mind, Dobrynya sets off on a grand adventure and what do you know? He reaches the Pukai River. And he was riding around for quite a while, with chainmail and a helmet, and horses just smell in general, so he jumps into the river. Oops. And surely enough, instant karma. A dragon emerges from the river with 3, sometimes 12 heads, and fire erupting from each. This is Zmi Godinich, and Dobrynya had just interrupted bath time. The two engage in a vicious struggle the likes of which the world wouldn't see again until Putin to Ohuro, Onichan Bath Assault. But Dobrynya is at a serious disadvantage. He'd taken off his armor for this little dip of his, and his only weapon is the one between his legs. So unless he planned to beat Godinich with his dick, he had to think fast. and then he saw it. Hat? Evidently it was a Greek pilgrim's hat, so Dobrynya grabs it and starts going to town. Now I'm wondering what the fuck kind of hat you could actually fight a dragon with. Did pilgrims run around with medieval pickelhaube? Had Oddjob been through here? Who knows? I've also read that he just filled a hat with sand, which would certainly be annoying. But the point is that Gorynych starts to lose this bizarre fight and says, Whoa, wait. Stop hitting me with that fucking hat for a second. I give up. Then the two cut a deal where Gorynych gets to keep its life in exchange for agreeing to never harm another Rus. It then flies off, never to be seen again. Except it was seen again, in Kiev. In a lightning raid, it storms the city, chewing through all resistance and kidnapping a princess. So much for the truce. A little while later, Dobrynya rides into town, awfully pleased with himself for his bath time escapade. But Prince Vladimir was waiting for him, and he was livid. It was you, wasn't it? Did you piss off that dragon? Well, it just ran off with my niece, so fix it, or you won't know a moment's peace for the rest of your short life. Now truly in deep shit, Dobrynya can only think of one thing. He runs back to mommy. No doubt his mother had some choice words for him, but she decides to bail her boy out. Here's a horse, here's a spear, and here's a whip made out of silk. Before he rides off, she warns him, Alright, you broke rule number 4, but for the love of God, remember the others. Dobrynya then sneaks his way into Gorynich's lair, and while he's there, he sees a bunch of prisoners. God knows what Gorynych was going to do to them, so Dobrynya breaks Rule 3 of Fight Club and moves to set them loose. But while doing this, he tramples a number of baby dragons. That's Rule 2 out the window. And again, instant karma strikes. One of them bites his horse, stunning it in place. Dobrynya was going to have a terrible time without his mount, but then he remembers the silken whip his mother gave him. He gives his horse a couple of whacks and it springs back to life, rejuvenated. Now all this business makes a tremendous racket, and Gorynych pops its head out. Perhaps all 3 of them. Seeing Dobrynya amidst a bunch of escaping prisoners and dead dragon babies. Now it's implied that Dobrynya came here to negotiate with Gorynych, but that obviously wasn't going to happen now. So the two throw themselves at each other. Round 2. They engage in a titanic struggle, and for the next 3 days they become a storm of violence. Steel upon scale, blood upon rock, and fire upon the sky. Though thoroughly battered, neither is mortally wounded. Psychologically though, Dobrynya was at his limits and he thought about just leaving. But then a voice from the heavens speaks into his ears and says, You're in too deep, man, go for another 3. To which he goes, 3 days? And the voice is like, no, 3 hours, I promise. So Dobrynya gathers up the last of his strength and throws down with Gorynych one final time. In this final exchange, he cuts the wicked dragon open, and out comes a torrent of blood. The dragon, now void of life, crumples onto Dobrynya. Now he has a new problem. He's completely out of gas, and Gorynych? He's still bleeding. Like a lot. So much so that Dobrynya is going to drown if it doesn't stop. He starts thrashing, but it's no good. Gorynich's corpse is just too heavy. A bit of revenge from the afterlife. Before his lungs start filling with dragon blood, though, the voice speaks yet again to Dobrynya. The spear. Put it in the ground. He does so, and whether through some property of the spear or just because he made a hole in the right spot, the blood drains from around Dobrynya and he's able to pull himself free. As a final bit of BM, he drags his battered and blood-soaked self to the river where this whole thing started, and he takes a nice, long bath. By the way, this river? It was in the Saracen Mountains, so fuck all the rules, I guess. Dobrynya makes it back to Kiev with the princess in tow, and if this were a Hollywood movie, this is where the two would be wed. But Dobrynya was a commoner, so they told him to fuck off. The princess would end up marrying another bogatyr, Alyosha Popovich, while Dobrynya eventually married a fighting woman by the name of Nastasha. Remember that name? It might come up in FGO. As a bizarre epilogue to the story, Dobrynya is sent out on a diplomatic mission sometime later, and Alyosha, dickhead of the century, starts saying, Yo, I'm like 97% sure Dobrynya's dead. What should we do about his wife? Well, the esteemed widow of Dobrynya Nikitich is too important a woman to leave unwed, so Prince Vlad goes and picks a new husband for her. On the day Nastasha is to be remarried, Dobrynya comes back into town, and he has a lot of questions. The answer, of course, is a foot up Alyosha's ass. And then they all live happily ever after. I think. And so goes the legend of Dobrynya Nikitich. He's apparently based on a real man also named Dobrynya, but that story seems to have a lot more to do with the real-life Prince Vladimir, so I'll pass on that for the time being. Thanks for watching. Please like the video if you found it entertaining, subscribe for more, and come watch me at twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream every weekend, 3 p.m. Pacific time. I'll be going from Wednesday through Sunday for the rest of the month, and this week's agenda includes Fear and Hunger, Cyberpunk 2077, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Jackbox, and Tunguska Sanctuary gacha rolls. So stop on by for a good time. See you there.